Okay, so today we'll be talking about chapter 17, section 4, and it's just called The Reformation Continues. And so as we talk about Protestant reformers like Martin Luther, John Calvin, Henry Zwingli, we'll be talking about how these folks are divided about how to reform the Christian church. So let's start with Switzerland. A Swiss priest named Huldrych Zwingli, it's a mouthful, right? Huldrych Zwingli called for reforms in the church dating back to 1520. And he felt that in addition to the indulgences, in addition to Scripture being supreme, there needed to be some additional changes. And the Catholic Church resented that. Remember, they wanted Luther burned at the stake. And now there's other people calling for changes and reform like Zwingli. And so they wanted him killed. Well, he had followers, meaning he had people who were willing to fight on his behalf, and wars broke out in Switzerland between the Catholics and the Protestants. Zwingli, who you might think of as a monk with, a long literary background, writing books, reading, arguing over academic subjects, led people in battle and was killed in battle. These aren't just academic discussions for philosophical debates with your friends. No, people are killing one another with swords because of this stuff. Meanwhile, John Calvin wrote a comprehensive series of books called The Institutes of the Christian Religion. And it was his attempt to make an exhaustive treatise on everything having to do with Christianity. So think of Star Wars plus the expanded universe, plus the Wikipedia pages, plus all the fandom. That was what Calvin wanted to accomplish with his Institutes of the Christian Religion. Now I'm going to summarize for you because the Institutes would actually fill up that bookshelf over there. It's a lot of different books. Now, he said that we are completely depraved, called it total depravity, that we are evil by nature, that we are predestined, now this one's tricky, to either go to heaven or to go to hell. That the term he used is unconditional election. And he also believed that not all are chosen. He called it limited atonement. And then finally, he believed that those who are chosen are destined to become believers. He called that irresistible grace. And then finally, he believed that those who were chosen were destined to be chosen, and that is a final thing. And he called that the perseverance of the saints. This is Calvinism in a nutshell. And so the Calvin doctrine has become the basis for the Baptist Church, for the Presbyterian Church, and for many others, in fact. And so Calvinism is what we call it today. Now, Calvin led the Reformation in Switzerland. He believed, in addition to these theological concepts, that the state and the church should be the same thing. And he based this off the Corinthians in the New Testament, where Paul was establishing a secular government within the church. In Corinthians, the church had social programs. They had a system of taxation. They had secular laws binding on the people. And so Geneva in Switzerland, led by John Calvin, became a very strict Protestant theocracy. Now, John Knox was a native of Geneva, and he wanted to take this faith to Scotland. And so he went to Scotland, and he preached there, and he taught these doctrines, and he founded the Presbyterian Church. Now, the Presbyterians, it's actually the church I grew up in. The term Presbyterian comes from a word called presbyter. We would just use the term elder or leaders within the church. Now Calvin's followers in France. Again, this doctrine grew and spread, and became a worldwide denomination. And I use the word denomination there as these people do consider themselves Christian. They're not Catholic, they're not Baptist, they're not Methodist. They are still Christian, but a different part of the Christian religion. So you've got the Huguenots, you've got the Presbyterians, and you've got the folks in Geneva led directly by John Calvin. Now, the Catholics, meanwhile, are trying to maintain what they believe to be the universal church. Catholic means universal. The long word is the Holy Apostolic Universal Catholic Church. It's a mouthful, right? So the Catholic Church still maintains that they can trace their lineage all the way back to the Apostle Peter, who was deemed the first pope by Jesus. And so that's how the Catholic Church understands Christianity. And that being said, they don't broker denominations. That's not the Catholic understanding. They believe in the one church. And so that would make the Calvinist in the Catholic understanding heretics. And what do you do with heretics? You burn them! And so they rounded up an army and they went and attacked the Huguenots. And again, wars based on these things. And so here's St. Bartholomew Day's massacre in 1572. Another famous group of separatists, or denomination of Protestant, if you will, are the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists were the first of these Protestants to teach a separation of church and state. In fact, it was from this tradition that the First Amendment evolved in the U.S. Constitution. They opposed wars based on religion. I mean, killing in the name of religion seems like an oxymoron. I don't know about you, but I kind of have a problem with that because I believe religion teaches not to kill. I don't know. Might be wrong on that one. But that's how the Anabaptists understood it. Is no, you don't kill people in the name of religion. And so these folks became the ancestors of the Mennonites and the Amish. Go to an Amish community sometime. It's awesome. They're the ones riding the horses that still don't use electricity and live in the old way. And they're also strictly peaceful and friendly and tolerant of other faiths. There were also several prominent women in the Reformation, leaders of the Reformation. For example, Marguerite of Navarre, hope I got that right, protected Calvin in France. Katrina Zell also worked with a number of reformers. And then finally, Katrina von Bora was actually Martin Luther's wife. Yeah, by the way, in the Catholic Church, priests are not supposed to get married. But one of the things Lutheran believed is that there's nowhere that it says that. There is like a little tiny verse in the Corinthians where Paul says it would be, and I quote, "It would be better for you to remain as I am, unmarried." But he actually, he kind of pauses. He says, by the way, I'm writing the Bible. Pause. Here's my personal opinion. 2 cents for what it's worth. Okay, resume recording. Right. And so in that little pause, he says, it would be better for you to remain as I am, unmarried. But he also says you don't have to. And you can read it for yourself. And so anyway, Luther read that, interpreted, and understood to say, I'm going to get married. And guess what? He got married. Great. Katrina von Bora was his wife. Now, the Catholic Church had some problems on their hands. For one, Luther's got a point about these indulgences. It is kind of sketchy that the church is basically selling forgiveness of sin. I mean, come on. But also, the church is losing followers. I mean, you've got the Calvinists, you've got the Anabaptists, you've got the Lutherans. I mean, whole peoples are leaving the faith. I mean, the entire country of England, meanwhile, has formed the Anglican Church. And so they got to do some soul searching. I mean, how are we going to turn this thing around? And so one of the leading Catholic reformers was Ignatius of Loyola. Wrote a book, Spiritual Exercises, called for a reconnection with the faith through meditation, prayer, and study. The Pope also created a whole new society called the Jesuits. He said, okay, Luther is not coming back. I get that. Okay, Calvin is doing his thing. We've already fought wars against these people and they're not coming back. What can we do? Well, we could send Jesuits to Mexico, at that time called Tenochtitlan. So guess what? Jesuits came with Cortez. It's one of the big reasons why Mexico is a predominantly Catholic country. We could send Jesuits around the world. Okay. So we send Jesuits to Brazil, to Argentina, to everywhere in South and Central America. Why? Because the Spanish were colonizing those countries. And the Spanish, meanwhile, remained loyally Catholic. And so on all of those boats, with Columbus, with Cortez, with Pizarro, etc., went Jesuits. And they taught Catholicism to the peoples that they met there. And, I mean, for example, the Alamo, the famous fort in Texas, was a Jesuit mission. So the Jesuits started schools, set up places all around the world to convert non-Christians to Catholicism. Now, also, even at the very top, the popes, Pope Paul III, Pope Paul IV, led reforms. For example, the Council of Trent was called by Pope Paul III. And they hoped to address a number of the concerns that Martin Luther brought up. So Luther's main point was that the Bible was the final authority in spiritual matters. And so at the Council of Trent, the Pope, again, called this meeting, and it was decided, and this is different than Luther, so make sure you understand, this is decided that the Church's interpretation of religion is final. Not the Bible by itself, the Bible plus the Church's interpretation of it. But they agreed with Luther that faith and good works are necessary for salvation. But here's the key difference again, that the Bible and church tradition are equally important. And they confirmed the use of indulgences. By the way, indulgences are a valid expression of faith in the Catholic tradition as of the Council of Trent. That was later undone. But they're going to maintain that if you want to buy forgiveness of sin, okay. Make your check payable to blah, 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 Catholic Church. And then meanwhile, not only did they double down on a lot of their teachings, they created the Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition. Yes. To do what? To find heretics. And what do we do with heretics? We burn them. And so Pope Paul IV also issued a list of forbidden books. Yes, the Catholic Church in 1559 started burning books. I would imagine Luther's writings, Calvin's writings would have been among the list of the index of forbidden books. Yes, and so here are the burning of books by the Catholic Church. Now, what are some of the religious and social effects of this? For one, the Catholic Church, those who remain loyal, were reunified. But Protestant denominations continued to grow and spread. And the Catholics and Protestants, in some cases, continued to fight and kill one another. I mean, you still have the Irish Republican Army in Great Britain committing acts of violence against British Protestants. But nonetheless, these two groups continue to grow and spread. In terms of social effects, the status of women, these Protestants, except for the Quakers, they were an exception, or even in early American history, the Shakers. There were very few exceptions. Most did not teach gender equality. But the political effects of the Reformation. The Catholic Church began to diminish. In its heyday, the Holy Roman Empire was the Catholic Church and Rome reborn. But after the Protestant Reformation, now the Catholic Church's influence, while culturally and religiously expands worldwide, politically is limited to Rome and the Vatican City in particular. In fact, the Reformation established a culture of skepticism. It became increasingly tolerant to question one's belief systems. And in fact, when we talk about the 1700s, we're going to get into an intellectual movement called the Enlightenment, where many of the books that became the foundation for the American government were written.